how you doing? On the streets of Kansas City in the heart of America. It's a very crisp Friday morning. I don't know why the temperature is the same as it was at midnight, but it just feels so much colder. I don't know how that works. We're gonna go on up into the plaza. The plaza is an upscale shopping district in Kansas City. It was built by a developer named J.C. Nichols, who also built a lot of neighborhoods in this area. We got more really confusing cone mazes here. They've been doing a lot of construction work. And the plaza was made to look like a Spanish plaza, hence the name. But you don't pronounce it plaza, it's plaza. Over the years, it's had several owners, and it's gone through several cycles of a lot of local stores and then a lot of chain stores. And now it's the new owners have decided to put together, encourage a lot of local stores in and amongst the big chains. However, the old owners completely decimated the local businesses, and the plaza almost went completely chain. It's also known for every Christmas season as a beautiful Christmas light display. When the plaza was started in the 1920s, it was the States built around automobiles type deal. And when it was first built, there was nothing out here but farmland, and this area was considered to be kind of a wasteland because this big creek to the south called Brush Creek runs right through it, and it was sort of like swampy. So J.C. Nichols built the plaza here, and all this area developed around it, and people at first were laughing at him, and then it's been extremely successful. However, with all the construction and neighborhoods going in, the creek got easily overloaded and would get inundated during heavy rains. In 1977, it rained really hard and flooded the plaza. Big, kind of a famous flood. There were cars, pictures of cars in the store windows. They were washed up by the floods. It flooded all the first floor areas of a lot of the stores in the plaza. It was a big disaster. And there have been several floods since, several times where Brush Creek has gotten close and people have gotten worried. And they've done a lot of work on Brush Creek and channelized it and concreted it in and widened areas and built little lakes and stuff so that the water has basins to go into. But still, when there's a real heavy rain, you can come down and you can watch the Brush Creek Rapids. Heading north from the plaza, we're heading into Westport, which is the oldest neighborhood in Kansas City. This was originally Missouri. It's where travelers would outfit themselves at first on the Santa Fe Trail to go to Santa Fe in Mexico, not Santa Fe, New Mexico, because Originally, Santa Fe was a part of Mexico until the Mexican-American War. And then later, the Santa Fe, California, Oregon trails all originated here, pretty much. The city leaders of Westport decided that they didn't like competing with the nearby town of Independence for outfitting, so they would build a place on the river, a port on the river where people could come by the riverboat and have cut about a day's travel off of their whole thing, and they could come in the comfort of riverboat, then take a ride south to Westport and be outfitted in Westport. And when they founded that new settlement, the new town on the Missouri River, real close to the Kaw River, or the Kansas River, it has two names, they decided to name the city after the Kansas River and called it Kansas City, which is why you end up with Kansas City being on the Missouri side for the most part, because there wasn't really such a thing as Kansas when they founded Kansas City. Kansas was just the name of a river and a territory. If you went west from this point on, it was considered sort of a no man's land, sort of a unsettled, unorganized territory, not even really a part of the United States. Kansas City is known for its wide boulevards, and this is actually not a boulevard. This is called Southwest Traffic Way. But what's nice about it gives you a pretty good egress and ingress around the city. It's sort of like freeways built in the city, because you have these broad 4-lane boulevards with usually a neutral area in the middle, a green space in the middle. In New Orleans, they call that the neutral ground, or the neutral zone, and the side of the street or a boulevard would be called the banquet. And you could, when you have a parade, when you have a party in the neutral zone, you can parade in the neutral zone or party on the banquet. And I don't know, I've lived in southern Louisiana at Slidell and visited New Orleans quite often, and so we came up to Kansas City from Slidell in the late 70s when my father was pursuing greater opportunities with the National Weather Service, and to be honest with you, I don't think he liked the oil rigs, and they kept sending him out to oil rigs to work on their weather equipment. They put weather equipment on the oil rigs in the Gulf so that they could, oil rigs and buoys, so that they can actually tropical weather like hurricanes and everything else like that. I don't think my dad thought much of doing that. I think it was too hazardous for him. And I agree, because it sounds like you'd be going up on some pretty tall heights. And I don't like heights. Why does it say Auschwitz? Not long ago, not far away. Oh, in Union Station, June 2021. That'll be a good thing to bring the kids to, since we've tried to educate them on that kind of dark a bunch of macho meatheads in this country who want to turn the United States into a regime, much like the Third Reich. Yeah, it's time to really educate the children on what that's all about and why it's not such a good idea. Southwest Trafficway takes you into I-35. I-35 runs from Duluth, Minnesota, all the way down to, well, I know it goes to Austin. It goes to San Antonio, too, I believe. And, it goes through Minneapolis and Dallas-Fort Worth, where they refer to the interchanges as mixmasters, which I think is pretty funny. But if you go to Dallas-Fort Worth, there's so many cars, so many freeways down there that the interchanges really are like mixmasters. It seems like there's 100 ramps going everywhere on some of them. They really mix you up when you get on them. I can tell you. You got to pay attention. And the predecessor road to I-35 was the Jefferson Highway. And I'd like to think of it as the Jazz Highway because so much music history is passed up through this corridor. It's a big music city. The cities in Texas, Austin, Dallas, are known for their music. And even Kansas City, which most people don't associate with the music or music history. There's a sad reason why that is, because actually Kansas City is very well known for its music history. Or not well known, but is very significant when it comes to music history and jazz. Charlie Parker came from here, and back when the city was wide open during the Prohibition era and into the 30s, musicians from all over the country, mainly African American musicians from the South, came to Kansas City because it was sort of a mecca where they could play and be paid well to play music. And so a lot of what is jazz now was developed here in Kansas City. And especially in some of the nightclubs that they had back then, and the jam sessions, the after hours jam sessions, especially at the Musicians Union Hall, Black Musicians Union, over at 18th and Highland. And jam sessions on the weekends. And the story goes that the musicians would come to Kansas City and they would have their paying gigs, usually downtown or at the Black Entertainment District at 12th Street and Vine. And they would play a lot of music. What were they called? There was the dance music of the era. I think shuffles. But like a lot of that, you were tasked with playing and paid to play the popular songs. And a lot of musicians, felt restrained by that. So after the clubs closed, they would all flock to the Union Hall and start playing what they wanted to play and work on their chops. And that's how you get the improvisation style of jazz music. Essentially in New Orleans, when you had the marching bands, which were the precursor to the Mardi Gras bands and everything, and they would play European-based martial music, like, marching bands. And the African Americans down there started adding riffs to it because they thought it was kind of dry and boring. And that was called jazzing up the music, adding a little bit of a twist to it. And pretty soon it was like, okay, well, you can do that, I'll do this, and we would play off each other. And so that's how jazz developed into this style where you had kind of a call and response, where you would lay out the song, and then you would go into rounds where people would play improvised melodies around the bass of the song. And in Kansas City, they took that on, and there was sort of this thing that always happened where black musicians would improvise and adapt and make a new style of music, but they wouldn't get recognized for it or even paid for it. Some white guy would come along, go, I like that, and I'm going to take it for my own and play it. And then they would sort of play it squarely and make it all, I don't know how to say it. They would clean it up because a lot of the music would have themes that were considered a little bit blue, and they would make it more presentable for a lily white audience. And then they would sell 1 million copies of it, get rich, and the black guys who actually invented the melodies and the songs and the styles would go, hey, what about us? There was this style of jazz that developed around Charlie Parker and others called bebop. And it's funny, sort of the goal of bebop was to make music that was so intense and hard to play that the white people couldn't copy it. The irony of that is nowadays, when you listen to bebop, usually it's a white guy playing it, and the style and form of music, and I just think that's kind of funny. It's kind of ironic. But when they got Pendergast for tax evasion and decided they were going to clean up the city in 1938, they shut down all the clubs and bars and speakeasies and everything, and really cleaned up the city, and they killed it, basically. They killed the nightlife. Kansas City became known as a very dry, boring town. And that's how, just a few years after the 1930s, people kind of was like, oh, Kansas City, that's all about what? We don't know. It's, what, they had a music scene there at one time? Because part of quote-unquote cleaning up the city is to enforce segregation really hard. And that's one thing that jazz music did, was it desegregated people. White people flocked to listen to jazz music, and they didn't care if they were in a quote-unquote club where they weren't supposed to be, mixing with, those people. But a lot of the uppity, self-righteous people cared, and they sort of took over, and I'm making air quotes that you can't see, cleaned up the city. And enforcing segregation was their idea of cleaning up the city, quote unquote. And So yeah, they pretty well successfully killed the music scene. And then there was this movie made called the what was it called? It had ties to Clint Eastwood, The Last of the Blue Devils, and essentially it's all these old black musicians that used to play in the Union Hall got together and played and talked about the style. It was kind of a documentary, but it was more about the music, which I appreciated. It was pretty much it's all they did was they just played music throughout the whole film. And the Blue Devils was one of the territorial bands. And the territorial bands were bands that played in the Southwest. A lot of African Americans were down there, Oklahoma, Arizona, New Mexico, but they couldn't make it there because, people didn't want to really listen to or go out to that type of music. So they came to Kansas City, the Mecca, to play and get paid and be able to make a living as musicians. And one of these territorial bands was the Blue Devils, and when they reunited, this was in 1979. It was the last time a lot of these guys got together. I don't know who he was, but somebody decided he was going to get some documentation of that with the cameras, film cameras at the time, and shot it. And we have this film that's kind of a glimpse into the past. So somebody remembered that Kansas City was once known for its music and music innovation. And with that, it kind of led to preservation efforts to restore the 18th and Vine area. Unfortunately, the 12th Street and Vine. 18th and Vine was the black business district. 12th Street and Vine was actually more of the black entertainment district. And unfortunately, in the 1950s, urban renewal happened, along with building highways, which highways were rich man's roads through poor man's neighborhoods. And they ripped the heart out of the African American neighborhoods naturally. And then they built projects. They called it urban renewal. We're going to tear down all the seedy hotels and businesses, and we're going to build these great projects. And what was it? What was the name of the Kansas City project? It was notorious. I think it was called Wayne Minor, right in the heart of 12th Street and Vine District, and pretty much ripped out the heart of the African American neighborhoods, destroyed them, and instead of helping and giving people low rent places they could get a start in, what it did was it concentrated poverty in the neighborhoods that were the most distressed and essentially destroyed the neighborhoods and created the racial inequality. Well, anyway, I got to continue this later on. It's time for me to put her up. So thanks, and please like and subscribe. See ya.